Welcome back. I'm Shelly Tygielski, and I'm a mindfulness teacher that works with social justice organizations, community organizations, political organizations, and with schools. I'm so happy that you could join me today. When I train leaders in many different spaces, one of the most important practices in self-care is learning how to define our boundaries. Yet one of the most difficult tasks for any leader is not necessarily the defining of those boundaries, but rather how to enforce them, understanding how to enforce them. One of the practices that all of us have to encounter in enforcing our boundaries is learning how to say no. No is a complete sentence. And it's very challenging for many of us to utter the words no. And we normally then find ourselves being obligated to doing things that we don't necessarily want to do or have time to do, which can result in us feeling overwhelmed, bitter, or judgmental of ourselves. So let's work on a practice today that can hopefully help you learn how to better define those boundaries and connect a little bit more with the word no. I know you've all heard this phrase before, fake it till you make it. And that's a really great practice when it comes to saying no, because it can be really hard at times to say, but the more you do it, the more empowered you feel and the more authentic you will be. So let's start with a phrase that I just verbalized to you earlier. But I want you now to take a moment to say this phrase either to yourself or out loud. No is a complete sentence. Your turn. So how did that make you feel when you said it? Was it believable to you? Did you feel squeamish? Identify what that feeling was. So identifying that feeling, see if you can sit with it without being judgmental of how you feel. And with that, we can begin our practice together. So to begin this practice today, let's agree on this one premise. And that premise is that when we don't know how to say no to things, our yeses actually lose their meaning. So one of the things that I oftentimes teach students is a practice that was taught to me by one of my teachers, David G. And it's something that he calls a pattern interrupt, which is essentially just a 16-second breath. So this 16-second breath gives you the space that you need on a daily basis to respond instead of react. Really, that is what the essence of practicing mindfulness is. When you are capable of responding with a firm no, it means that you are no longer reacting with a very uncommitted yes. So if you're the type of person that is inclined to say yes to something that you really don't want to do, you're basically allowing people to cross that boundary that line in the sand that you've drawn. And the best thing that you can really do for yourself is nothing. You could just take a pause. And when you take a pause, what you're essentially saying to the world and to yourself is, I need a moment. I'll get back to you. And that gives you the ability to then respond in a mindful way. Perhaps even helps you muster up the courage that you need to do so. So the beauty of this practice that I'm going to teach today is that you don't need to be seated or even have your eyes closed. This is really why it's probably the practice that I use most often throughout my day. And it's the ability to be able to take mindfulness off the cushion and into your daily life that is really something that I hope you gain from this particular practice. So just for today, so that we're all practicing this in the same manner, if you can just take a comfortable seated position, and you don't need to close your eyes if you don't want to. I'm going to demonstrate for you the 16-second breath, and then we can do it together for a few cycles. So the 16-second breath works like this. You're going to inhale to the count of 4. Then you're going to pause for the count of 4 and imagine that your breath is just going all the way down into your navel. And then you're going to exhale out through your mouth for the count of 4 and pause again for the count of 4. So let's try that together, shall we? Begin by breathing in gently through your nose to the count of 4. Ready? Breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Then holding the breath, 2, 3, 4. And exhaling out through your mouth, 2, 3, 4. And then pausing again, 2, 3, 4. And now try this practice on your own for a few cycles. Breathing in and pausing. And then exhaling out and pausing again. So coming out of that practice, how did it feel for you? I've always marveled at how just in 16 seconds my brain could create that pattern interrupt and allow me to just pause really mindfully during the day, giving me the strength that I need or the presence of mind to respond instead of react. I want to give you some homework for the coming week. Perhaps during the week you can commit to doing at least one pattern interrupt or 16-second breath practice each day. And see if you can remember to do it when you're feeling that you're in a moment where you're being reactive, where you're maybe more inclined to react to something as opposed to responding. So maybe it's in a moment where you have gotten a text message that you feel the need that you need to reactively respond to, or an email, or maybe you're in a conversation with somebody and you don't necessarily like what you're hearing. See if you can have the presence of mind to just pause and take those 16 seconds in any which way, even if your eyes are open and you're standing up and you're perhaps even listening and taking in what another person is telling you. That's the beauty of this practice and why it's so practical, because you can literally do it anywhere. While you're driving, you could be mid-conversation, you could be listening to students in a classroom speak to you. So thank you so much for joining me and taking the time to spend a few minutes during your day to invest in yourself